Alrighty, Genesis 9 and 10. Let's jump straight in. So, the end of the Noah story, packed full of promise that is for all of us, all of mankind, and interestingly, animals and the earth itself, which I think is very cool because actually it shows that we're not the only ones who are solely reliant and dependent on God. Even the animals look to him for their provision, their sustenance, and their promise, their ultimate promise to not be destroyed. I think it's quite cool that this is a promise not just with mankind, but with every living thing, and even the very earth itself, that God says, I will not destroy you, I will uphold you, and I will be with you forevermore. An incredible promise, really. So we know that Genesis 9 starts with the same instruction and the same blessing as Adam and Eve received right at the beginning of this book. It says, God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And I just love that. Even after this complete reset on mankind and after the heartbreak that we know that it caused God, he still releases us into this mandate, this fruitfulness mandate. And it's so much the heart of God that we should be people who not only exist with him or even follow him, but actually take what he's given us and multiply it, that we are fruitful. His promise over us is fruitfulness. His kind of covenant with us involves our fruitfulness, and that we would be those that would multiply whatever we have. And that's so much more than having children. And it's so much richer than that. It's about multiplying the things of God that we have in our hands and seeing them become more as we walk in them or faithfully steward them. So obviously this passage or this command is so reminiscent of the parable of the talents in the Gospels, where we see these servants receive their talents, their gold, and those who bury what they have are rebuked, and those who multiply what they have are rewarded. And it's just the heart of God right through Scripture, is that we would receive something good from him and not just sit on it or use it for our own good, but actually multiply it and see him grow it as we use it. So, for example, it's more than money. It's more than children. It's like we need to be people who have the mindset of multiplying the faith in the community that we're in, or multiplying the hope of every room that we walk into, or multiplying the joy of every conversation that we get to participate in. We're multipliers. That's part of our mandate, and it's part of our identity, is that we would be those who would go out and multiply. So there's an incredible promise here at the end, in the beginning of Genesis chapter 9, an incredible promise of God. And he even gives us a sign for this promise. The sign is the rainbow. And the only other times we hear about the rainbow in Scripture are when it's encircling his throne. It's a sign of his glory. It's a sign of his authority and the wonder around it. And so it's just a great reminder, the rainbow, that the glory is God's. The glory of this promise is God's. The glory of its fulfillment is God's. And, you know, it's a beautiful tying up to a really quite unusual and also hard story to hear, that mankind is wiped off the face of the earth and God begins again. But in that beginning again, he's still so generous to cause us to be fruitful, to cause us to be multipliers, and to cause us to be the recipients of this incredible promise that he will not destroy us, no matter what we do, no matter how far from him we end up. He will always continue to uphold us and provide for us, which is amazing. And then in the second half of Genesis 9, we have this kind of playing out of Noah's story. And it seems like maybe his later days are not the glory-filled heroics of his early days. But I'm going to give you some maybes based on what I've read and what I've studied. Nobody knows exactly what happened here, but let me just give you some maybes from my understanding of what happens. Noah obviously is drunk, and it says he lay uncovered in the tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. Now, this verse 22, told his brothers, the original language, the original translation implies that he told them with delight. He told them with a dishonoring joy what was going on with Noah, that he was drunk, that he was naked, and he's reveling in this, delighting in this. So there's some kind of mockery or something that ultimately is not helping his father. It's not honoring his father. It's not seeking to make right something that's wrong. It's almost enjoying the kind of, whether it's suffering or embarrassment of another. So it may be that simply Ham saw his father naked and kind of delighted in that and told his brothers with delight. When you read down verse 24, it says, when Noah awoke from the wine and knew what his younger son had done to him, it implies that either he knew about the evil that was in his son's heart in his response to his father, or maybe there was something that went on in that tent. We don't know. But the outworking of it is that Noah curses Ham's son, Canaan. So in Genesis 10, we begin to hear about these lists of generations and the three sons of Noah, Japheth, Ham, and then Shem. We get to hear who their offspring are. Lots of cleverer people than me have looked into it and believe that out of Japheth's line come the Europeans and potentially even the Indians. So there are some sons that he has that go on to populate that part of the world. Then we hear about Ham's offspring, and we see maybe some familiar names that you might have read about in other parts of the Bible. Often these are names that are used to describe a group of people who are enemies to the people of God. So Cush, we hear about the people of Cush, the Cushites. Later on in the Old Testament, it tends to be the people who are against opposing God. The Egyptians never really come out of stories too well. Obviously, you've got Canaan here, and then Nimrod, who goes on to be the kind of settler of Babel, the Tower of Babel, the Babylonians, people who are notoriously against God. In fact, the name Nimrod means let us rebel. So this curse that is spoken over Ham's descendants goes on to play out as him being the father of many of the enemies of the people of God. And then we've got Shem, who fathers a group of people from whom actually Abraham will descend, and even Jesus himself will find his line through Shem's descendants. So it is a list of names, but wherever you see a list of names, try and consider, what of this is familiar to me? Who have I heard of? What could that mean? What are we seeing play out here? And ultimately, we're seeing a son who chose not to honor and help his father, but to have other intentions in mind, to revel in his failure or in his weakness. And the outworking of that is that for many generations, there's this pulling in a different direction from the people of God. So it's just that reminder again that our decisions can play out and have deep consequences. And certainly for Ham, that's exactly what happened, is he made a bad decision and it had a huge consequence, and his entire line then came to be representative of those who were against God or rebelling from God. So interesting chapters, Genesis 9 and 10. Let me know what you guys found out from those chapters or what you found interesting, and we'll jump into 11 and 12 tomorrow.